40% Merlot, 40% Malbec, and 20% Cab Sauv.
Tastes good for you. It's not that good.
Welcome to the Wine Enthusiast podcast. The world in your glass.
Interested in breaking news from the wine, beer, and spirits industries? Read the new, free multimedia information and news hub, Beverage Industry Enthusiast. Written and produced with a fresh point of view, BIE is your go-to online destination for the trade. You'll meet the people who power the industry, watch exclusive videos with industry professionals, and receive a weekly news email. Sign up now at winemag.com/BIE.
I'm Nils Bernstein, food editor at Wine Enthusiast magazine. I'm here at Seatown restaurant in Seattle, Washington, right on the waterfront in the Pike Place Market. I'm looking out to Puget Sound. I'm about to learn a whole lot about oysters and other shellfish from the area.
I'm Lily Mossolino. I'm here representing Penn Cove Shellfish and all the great seafood that we provide.
I grew up in Seattle, but you don't have to have grown up in Seattle to have tried Penn Cove mussels. They're known around the world. Can you tell us a little bit about Penn Cove, how long they've been in business, and what exactly they do?
I would love to. So Penn Cove Shellfish, it's actually been around since 1975. Ian and Raul Jeffords are both co-owners, and Ian's wife, Karen, and their father back in 1970s, they were raised as military brats, I guess you could say, and so they traveled all over the world, and they'd had shellfish and seafood everywhere they went. And in Europe, their father noticed that, mussels were huge. It was delicious. Everybody ate it. I think Belgium is the largest consumer of mussels in the world. And so when they got to the States and they were in Washington, the story goes that their father was like, we're gonna do a mussel farm. We're gonna start one. And so they took a boat out, went searching for the best place to put their rafts, came across Penn Cove over on Whidbey Island, and just saw this incredible amount of naturally growing wild mussels just lining the bay. It's pretty amazing, actually, how much wild still grows out there. And he said, this is it. This is, where we're going to start it.
Some of the best oysters in the world come from these waters around where we're sitting now. But you can't just say that, Pacific Northwest oysters have a certain quality, because within that there's such variety as well.
That is very true. So your Pacific oysters tend to have less salinity to them than the Atlantic oyster, because you've got more salt water over there, whereas our oysters here tend to be fed from a lot more fresh water coming out of the Samish River, all the rivers here. Gosh, and now I'm forgetting them. So you've got really nutrient-rich waters here, and that leans them towards a sweeter oyster. It's where you get the cucumber, melon hints coming out of that you won't notice, say, in your Atlantic oysters, which tend to be more of a salty minerality to them, right. A briny minerality.
And when they talk about sweetness in oysters, I kind of know what it is by my sense, but are you really talking about a lack of salinity, or less salinity, or also this kind of rounded, fruity kind of?
Kind of that end of that statement, because your oyster is comprised not only of the brininess that comes from the water that is in its shell, it's liquid, but also it's meat, and its meat is developed through what it eats, its nutrients, and that's where you kind of get this meat sweetness. And it's kind of like when in wine, you're trying to describe an off dry, and you're like, it's sweet, but it's not sweet. And people hate it when you say that, because they're like, no, it's not a sweet wine. But it's trying to catch that flavor in express it in words that comes across in your palate.
Yeah, you kind of know it when you taste it, but it's hard to express. It's funny because there are so many parallels when you talk about tasting oysters between oysters and wine, because it starts with the visual, how beautiful it is in the shell, the deep cup, It has that character before you even start tasting it. It has texture as a huge component in wine, and obviously oysters. And then you have fruit, vegetable, nutty, mineral. You have the kind of flavor components that you talk about with oysters are a lot of the same ones that you talk about when you talk about wine.
Exactly. I love the idea of oyster tasting and people getting more into oysters as a pastime, because it does have that kind of niche of it's fun to do, but it's also very interesting. And as Merroir and terroir, you're dealing with your soils and your water and how these end products are a result of their location. So, I had actually read an article that you had done on terroir, and you had mentioned how a lot of places tend to serve their wine with other foods from that region.
Right. Yeah, they call it, what grows together goes together.
Yeah. And I thought that just made so much sense, because you do see that they pair so well. Not to say that you can't pair a Pacific oyster with, a wine from France.
Sure.
But it is interesting to see the parallels there and how food is grown both in the sea and on the land.
Yeah, I think it's really exciting.
I'm Chef Sam Burkhart. I'm the executive chef of Edda's and Seatown Seabar.
Hi, Chef Sam.
Hi, how you doing?
So what do we have here? You brought us an assortment of local oysters.
Yeah, we get all of our oysters from Penn, Cove, of course. Usually raw, comes here 4 to 5 days a week. I think he gets his day started about like 3 or so. Gets up at 2.
Wow, right about when I'm going to bed.
Yeah. To make sure that all the downtown and especially us at Tom Douglas restaurants have delicious Penn Cove oysters. So some Capitals, some Cranberry Creeks, and some Compass Points. The Capitals will be a little salty. The other two are kind of in the middle. Nothing super sweet, but a good assortment here to kind of get us started. We serve ours here with a mignonette, just a classic accompaniment to oysters. So it's some champagne vinegar, some shallots, a little bit, just a touch of Tabasco to kind of give it a little something else to it.
And this beautifully bruleed lemon.
Yeah. Brulee lemon is our signature touch here. So we call it a sweet lemon. Gives it just, everybody's had lemon on your oysters. We'd be happy to give you regular lemon, but we put a little sugar on top and hit it with a blowtorch to kind of give it a different perspective.
These are incredibly beautiful. I wish we had a picture of them right now. They're all quite, especially compared to Atlantic oysters, they're quite small. The first thing I noticed. I actually grew up in Seattle and moved about 20 years ago, so I, frequently have these desperate cravings for Pacific Northwest oysters, and these are how they look in my fantasies.
Yes.
So thanks for that.
So we serve the oyster just as it lies in the shell. A lot of places, so basically you come through with your oyster knife on the right side, you cut the top joint and the bottom joint, and then you put it down. Basically, you walk away. You don't need to do anything else. When you have a perfect oyster that lies in the shell and it's not beat up and it's not punctured a whole bunch, and that's really like the key of like a good oyster place. Like if people got to flip their oysters, everybody does it their own way, but we here like to kind of like show off our craftsmanship by just showing it like that.
Keep it as pure to how it grows.
Exactly.
These are stunning. It looks like they've been brushed with something for a photo shoot. They're glistening.
Yeah. One of the reasons we're called Seatown is to try to give people from out of town a taste of Seattle, so they can come in, eat an oyster, drink a Northwest beer or some wine, and really kind of get a sense of what oysters are here and what like the seafood situation is
just
here.
Shellfish in general.
Yeah.
All right, will you join me?
Yes.
All right, that's very big of you.
Start at that end, I'll start at this end, or?
That sounds good. Yeah, we'll meet in the middle. I'm just gonna eat them with no sauce. Oh wow, a really deep cup. A really crisp. It's actually kind of both crisp and a little bit creamy. And it's briny. It's powerfully briny, but it's not dank at all. It's bright.
Yeah. Well, and So something that can be controversial amongst oyster lovers is that the difference of where your oysters come from and also how they're kept. So at Penn Cove, we get oysters from different farms all over Washington, and some in California and some up in BC. They all come through our facility, and everything is fresh and live and served live, or brought live to our restaurants and shipped all over the country. But to maintain that, we keep them out in our waters in Penn Cove for a couple of days when they're transported to us originally, just to keep them, extra fresh and really happy, because you want to eat fresh oysters if you're at a restaurant. You don't want to know, oh, those things came out 2 weeks ago. You're like, what?
Well, these taste like happy oysters.
Yeah, well, and so
sorry to
a bit of the
consume them and destroy their happiness forever, but the happiness is converting to us.
But so oftentimes you'll get people who argue that it's called wet storing. That process of doing so, they lose their flavor, their original flavor, because the water that is in their shells is actually from where they've been kept those few days before they're being sent out. And I've tasted a lot of oysters. I've tasted oysters that came from their location, and to be honest, I don't find it makes a huge difference, because the meat itself, what this oyster has been built up of, is from where it's grown. So that maybe that primary flavor, that liquid that you're getting, that really nice saltiness, can differ depending on whether it's come from where it was originally harvested or if it's being kept somewhere else first. But really, it doesn't change the nature of the oyster itself.
If it's a great, happy oyster, it's a great oyster. All right, let's work through these. These are phenomenal. So I'm going to do one and one and one to see. I just had the Capital, and the Compass Point has a really different, it's a meatier flesh, maybe a bit sweeter as well.
Yes.
And it's different in size and texture, but they're not far apart. I mean, the Capitals are from Spencer Cove, and the Compass Points are from Samish Bay. But is that difference between them? Is that something that is in part, even though those areas are quite close to each other, they're different?
Well, and I live on Whidbey Island, and I drove over here last night. So I took the bridge over from the island over to Mount Vernon towards Seattle. Well, within that, just crossing the bridge, it was something like 10 degrees warmer. So you can go 20 miles or so, and your temperatures are going to be very different in Washington. And that does affect the waters in which these oysters are in. And so you will get more algae or more nutrients depending on where they're at, and they also respond to those temperatures in their texture. So you noticed how the Compass had a meatier feel to it, the texture there, whereas the Capitals are a little bit more tender. Colder waters are going to create typically a firmer meat, and those are the things you'll notice. So your flavors might still be very similar, but then you're getting a difference in texture depending on where they're at. So
it's so funny. It's as if you really could be talking about wine. You have, even on the same vineyard, might just have slopes that have different sun exposures, and they're quite close to each other, but they're growing. You might grow entirely different varieties that might be suited for different exposures that are quite close to each other in a vineyard. And yeah, it's fascinating. So I noticed we're both eschewing the mignonette and the lemon, which are delicious, but I find when I taste oysters, I just like them straight. Is that something you recommend if people are kind of learning about oysters? And
with the learning about oysters, if you haven't had an oyster before, I might recommend, kind of helping it along, mignonette, some lemon, something like that, because it can help cut through some of that flavor that people who aren't big on food might not necessarily like. But, if you really want to taste the differences, figure out what's going on with this oyster, what might have created this flavor, and pinpointing the differences in flavors, I would recommend definitely, just that nice liquor in there. You want to have a little bit of that liquid, that ocean spray that's in that oyster, so you get kind of the taste that it's living in.
It's probably a good idea to taste an assortment so that you can taste these really pretty noticeable differences even when you're tasting oysters from the same area. They usually come with a little cocktail fork to help kind of pry the meat out of the shell. What do you think? Fork or no fork? You just bring the shell up to your mouth and slurp, or use a little fork?
I'm a slurper. I'm not going to begrudge anybody the way they'd like to consume their oyster. If you're eating it, I'm happy.
I'm a slurper too.
Yeah.
Chef Sam, slurp or fork?
Slurp.
All right. I don't know. We might be, I think we're going to go on record as being pro slurp. I'd love to talk a little bit about, we're talking about the oysters in their purest form, but cooked oysters can be amazing as well. Chef Sam, do you have any thoughts on, are you not destroying a perfect oyster by cooking it?
I think it's just like, it's like eating braised short ribs versus having a nice mid-rare steak, kind of, like there's more ways to enjoy things than just the pure way, kind of. And while I think eating a, well-shucked, like beautiful oyster from the Pacific Northwest or wherever you're getting from is it's like the simplest and one of the like most interesting food experiences you can have, I feel, just like because it's like nothing else in the entire world. Doing a good cooked oyster can also be, it can be a 9 instead of a 10 kind of, but like they can be done really well. Here at Seatown, we had a little fun with it. We pan fry them with some cornmeal, and then we give you some kimchi that's made right down the street at Britt's Pickles, and we give you a little chili aioli, and then some lettuce leaves. So you make little lettuce wraps. So you put a pan-fried oyster in the lettuce leaf, a little kimchi, a little sauce, roll it up, and eat it.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, it's really good. It's one of our more popular dishes.
Now, the oysters to cook with, would those be different than ones that you would eat on the half shell?
You'd want a little bigger ones. You want to be a little plumper. Like some of these little capitals we have here, like that would be, once they fried up, they'd probably be about the size of a dime or something like that, and they'd maybe not be worth quite the amount of time that you put into preparing that. That's another cool thing about oysters, just like a huge range of sizes and flavors. And so while it might be an acquired taste to do it straight on the half shell, doing them either shucking them out of the shell and frying them, or putting some compound butter on them and putting them in under the broiler is a delicious way to do it. I love them on the grill. Put some delicious butter on there, or just some butter and Worcestershire and hot sauce and herbs.
Would you shuck it before putting it on the grill, or can you put it on the grill?
You can do it two ways, kind of. You can put them on the grill and they'll pop open, and then you can basically just like easily take the shell off and then pour your butter over the top. Or I like to shuck it, make sure it's cleaned out so it won't stick in there, make sure it's no shell fragments, stuff like that. Then put the butter on, put it in the oven.
Yum.
This podcast is produced by Large Media, LARJ Media. Wine Enthusiast is made possible by grapes, sunshine, and wine, and by the hard-working editors who bring you news and information on your favorite beverage every day. If you like what we're doing, share our podcast with your friends and give us a review on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. For more fun wine information, follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Wine Enthusiast.